Welcome, everyone. This is Jay Wimpy with the American Civil Defense Association. I'm going to be hosting the meeting tonight. We're happy to have Jim Phillips here. Jim's a nationally known speaker and teacher who has taught thousands of classes all across the US and Canada for over 45 years. For years prior to his career, his avocation was teaching cold weather safety and survival, and this is still a major part of his instruction. Jim's educational background is in engineering, science, and technology, with his first years of teaching in the 1970s as a certified nuclear reactor operator instructor. Jim is a strong advocate of self-reliant living and family preparedness. He encourages people to develop a powerful, positive purpose and mission to focus on which will carry them through very serious or life-threatening events. We're very happy to have Jim with us here tonight. Just a disclaimer right up at the front. Nothing in this presentation should be considered legal, medical, or financial advice. The opinions of the viewers can differ considerably and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of TACTA. You should always do your own research and consult with professionals. The format tonight is informal. We would like to allow questions on the fly so that you can unmute and ask a question. You're also welcome to use the chat function, and I can try to keep up with that a little bit and maybe answer some questions on the fly or get some information. We intend to have this information, this presentation in video form on the TACTA website, and we'll also be providing an outline of the presentation for your use in order to review the information. So with that, any questions up front? If not, we'll go ahead and let Jim start with the presentation. And you're already should already be seeing Jim's screen, and we will be discussing sanitation in a disaster situation, which is a very important topic. Poor water and sanitation have killed a lot more people than actually bombs and bullets in most war situations and in disruptions. So it's a very important topic. Thank you very much, and go ahead, Jim.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here and talk to folks again at TACTA. We've done that a few times through the years, and it's an honor to do that. Following a disaster, there are two really overlapping. They're big, they're major, and over the long term, these will cause more death and disease and misery than anything else. And to get ourselves started here, and I always like to start kind of in the same place on some principles and concepts, and pay attention to the fact that most of the common prepping, and I use prepping, I don't mean to put that down, but a lot of the information and instructions, they're wrong, dangerous, mostly because they're incomplete. They don't go deep enough when it gets really, really bad. When things are minor, well, okay, you can kind of get away with anything. But when it's really bad, it can be serious is the problem.
So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
We couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
We're actually being given a lot of information from time to time that is to get us pointed in the right direction. And my whole purpose in this meeting is not to cover things in depth because it would take hours to do that. And I did promise to be done before midnight tonight because I could go for quite a few hours on this topic. The truth about life is simply this. Things happen. There's no doubt something may happen tomorrow. But how you're prepared to meet tomorrow will make all the difference in the world. If you're prepared for the worst, then no matter what happens, it will be an adventure. I look at things from a worst case scenario, not because I'm into gloom and doom, but because if it could happen, I'd like to be prepared because I don't like to suffer any more than I have to. Now, the approach that I take is trying to look at what are the laws, what are the truths, what are the principles involved versus recipes, ingredients, and cookbooks. And some of these that we're going to touch on very briefly tonight of the 16 laws for well-being and success, all of which apply to emergencies as well as everyday life, We'll just touch on them briefly, 6 of them tonight. Now, the law of provident living, I recognize a few people have been here before, so this looks familiar. It's very simple. The list from the top down is spiritual, attitude, knowledge, and then stuff. The material things are very, very important, but you've got to get it in the right order versus if you turn this kind of upside down, ingredients, list of stuff in a cookbook, and what could happen, and then the recipe, here's what you do in this particular situation. What you have to be able to have is the understanding back here to knowledge so that you'll know what to do with the stuff or what you need to create or find different than what you in fact may have. So law of stewardship is another one, very simple concept. You have the authority because you're alive, therefore you have the responsibility to act and you'll be held accountable. The responsibility and the accountability are yours. Another one that ties into this is what I call the law of a parachute. You have to have it before you need it. You have to have it on when you need it and, with you. You have to actually know how to use it. You have to actually use it, but here's the kicker. It has to be of life-saving quality. And a lot of the things that we're being taught about and or using, the quality may not be there. Now, we're not talking about parachutes and jumping out of planes. What we're talking about really is your attitude, your knowledge, your skills, your supplies, the tools and things that you have, because the disaster doesn't care. It has no responsibility for your well-being. That is your stewardship. Now, the stewardship falls into 9 areas. These 9 areas is everything you need to know, do, and have for every day of your life and emergencies at the same time. It's about foundation, which is really these laws and principles and attitude and everything. It's clothing, water, sanitation, shelter, wellness, tools, and supplies in that order of these 9. And there's a reason for that order, but I won't take time to give it to you right now. But we're going to be talking about sanitation and 2 things about sanitation that are really, really critical to understand how they fit together. Now, the big picture, when we talk about sanitation, trying to get our head around this is, it is what I call the hidden disaster that few people really recognize how serious it is. Why is sanitation so important? What is the big deal here? Well, because most people are clueless. They just do not understand how important it is. Therefore, they're not making preparations. And when something happens, it's like, well, let's just see how bad it is before we do something. Get you into big trouble. Let's put this in perspective a little bit here. Now, health and life expectancy has improved tremendously over the past 130, 40 years. Our life expectancy and our quality of life has really gone up. And what people give antibiotics, drugs, doctors, hospitals, they get most of the credit. It doesn't belong there. Those are helpful, but where it really belongs is on the sanitation practices that we have improved tremendously over the years. Just kind of an example, some statistics. 1952, I remember this very well because I was getting vaccinated and everything for polio. There were 14 cases per 100,000, not fatalities, but just cases. That's a nasty critter. You don't really want to catch that. And it caused kind of a national panic. But get this, in 1900, there were around 4,429 babies died from diarrhea per year, these newborns. And if you consider this, that diarrhea deaths were 100% caused by failed sanitation. It was sanitation practices that was causing the problem. Ignorance and not knowing what to do and how to do it. Now, sanitation is vitally important because where sanitation is poor, disease and death run rapid. But we in this country take a look and say, well, those poor people over in those poverty-stricken countries, thank goodness I don't live there. You could be there in a heartbeat when certain things happen. So gratefully in the US, we are very inexperienced with sanitation breakdowns. It just doesn't happen very often. And when it does, there's people that'll come to the rescue. There's hospitals and doctors and everything. But when it happens, when we don't have those services, it's going to catch most people ignorant and unprepared to deal with it. Here's some statistics, a little more recent, so to speak. This tremendous earthquake that we had back at 12 years ago. There were official cholera cases. This is at the end of 2010. There were 75,000 cases, 2,000 deaths, actual clinical apparent, around 200,000 people being sick. The subclinical infected 800,000. And what that meant is that 10% of the population was either sick with it or was carrying it at a subclinical level. Let's move up a couple of years here. December 2012, the hospitalizations were running 2,300 per week with 40 deaths per week. And then when we move a little further up the calendar in here, there had been 734,000 plus confirmed cholera cases with 9,000 plus. And of course, those numbers have continued to tick up. Subclinical infection could exceed 2.5 million people, 25% of the population. By the way, they're still fighting that epidemic from the cholera that got started. Now, at this time, back in 2014, there had been $13.5 billion in aid sent to Haiti. It didn't all go into sanitation things, but this was rebuilding the infrastructure and helping people and rescue and all these kinds of things. You need to understand that the untreated mortality rate of cholera is 60%. If you don't get right on it and treat it properly, quickly, that it's 60% fatal. In other words, you really don't want to get it. And what if there had been no aid? That's the question. What if there had been no aid? All right. Sanitation preparedness encompasses two primary areas. These things are very, very closely coupled. One of them is you have to be 100% sure of your ability to keep yourself and your environment around you clean, and you must have ample amounts of safe water for consumption and sanitation. Of course, it doesn't have to be quite drinkable for sanitation, but you've got to have enough to take care of that. It's the consumption side of it, not having sanitary water. That's where these things tie together. So now we have to talk about water because it's a part of this equation. So why is water so critically important? Well, what's the leading cause of death on planet Earth right now? It is dysentery. Where does it come from? Contaminated water. And what that means is that in the US, gratefully, we're very inexperienced with mass amounts of dysentery, diarrhea. But that also means when we don't have sanitary water, it's going to catch people off guard. And they won't know you've got a problem until you're now sick. You have to be ahead of this curve. You can't allow it to sneak up on you. So having an ample supply of sanitary water is vital for your health and well-being. A few more statistics to point this out. Here we have a graph. This is the mortality, infant mortality rate around 1900, way it was running. And then we had known about, and researchers had known about sanitation issues in this, but they had to get it into the public's hand and into people that were doing things, into hospitals and all. And as that started to occur between 1900 and into the 50s, the mortality rate of infants, young children, declined significantly, and it continues to go down. Another one in Pittsburgh, typhoid fever deaths. In there around 1907, there was a water filtration plant put in. It's not having sanitary water. Look what happened to the typhoid death rate just by filtering that water. Now, the point is, if you get this water and sanitation equation wrong, you get sick, you die. So sanitation and water fail in this country. My goodness, you know, the lifestyle we have is incredible. And you take a look at all of the interconnections between things in our infrastructure that includes water and communications and transportation, all these kinds of things. But you'll notice that they're all linked together by those blue lines and interlinked because of them of power, electricity, our power grid. The power grid is actually the weakest link that we have on our entire society and all of our infrastructure. We could do a class on that for hours, is what it comes down to. So infrastructure fail, and this is serious. How can that occur with, electricity? Pandemic, nuclear events, civil unrest, breakdown, EMP, all these things. And even if it isn't an EMP that takes it out all at once, if you just take out enough of these people that can't go to work because of a pandemic or they're sheltering in place or something like that, you start having cascading minor problems because of a loss of maintenance workers, loss of operating personnel, and it cascades through the system and things shut down. Now, hopefully, if you don't have equipment being destroyed because of some kind of attack, you'll get it back. But if it has been damaged, you might not. So people, us, in developed societies with improved lifestyles, don't want things to get worse. I don't want them to get worse, but they happen just because they do. Things occur, and sometimes unpredicted, unprepared kinds of things, and it really shuts things down. Our modern disposal systems, they require a functioning infrastructure, the support personnel, electricity, fuels, all these things, and they can fail because, well, things get broken. Loss of the energy, loss of transportation, loss of communication, loss of the internet shuts down an awful lot of things. And then you don't have the maintenance staff and the operating personnel. What you have to understand also is that during emergencies, when they're very severe, people break down. It's pretty simple. Physical stress, emotional stress, don't get enough rest, poor and inadequate nutrition. But then you put on top of that the biological and microbial overload, and the immune system, because of these other stresses, it just simply collapses. People get sick, and the big killers are these right here: cholera, dysentery, typhoid. Now, there's others that'll take people out when they're weakened, but those are the big ones. And these are beautiful creatures. When you look at them under the electron microscope, they have been created to do a job. And if you do not protect yourself from them by avoiding them or allowing your immune system to get weak or whatever it is, they will do their job and they will simply take you out. So following a disaster, failed sanitation is a huge deal. And it will track down, sicken, kill, maim people who are ignorant, who are unprepared, who do not recognize the problem, have not made provisions for it. So when things really break down, it will be up to you. That's the bottom line. I'm not into gloom and doom, but I like to take it from the point of what's the worst thing that could happen. I want to be ready to deal with it. And if it doesn't happen, life is easy. If it does happen, I'll deal with it. Well, the cavalry may not be coming simply because they're in the same mess that you are, or they have a long distance to travel to get to you and they're helping all the people in between. So your actions now will determine your outcome later on. That's what it comes down to. Go back to this idea of Haiti. What if aid had not been provided to them? What if aid didn't come to you or me or to this country if we have something major going on? This is catastrophic, is what it comes down to. So I want you to understand that the people of Haiti were better prepared than our people are for this level of destruction that occurred there. And you say, you're kidding me. I want you to know that should the U.S. have an Haiti level of event, destroying that much infrastructure and equipment and death and things being set up in just terrible conditions here, it will be worse for us than them. Why? Why would it be worse for us? Well, what was the lifestyle of most people in Haiti? It was just barely above ground zero. And when their systems collapsed around them, literally and figuratively, they had already been dealing with crummy water, lousy transportation, poor communication, all these kinds of things. What about us? It's about our collective attitude on how we'll deal with the infrastructure that's been destroyed. We're talking about water, sewer, electricity, transportation, all of these things, including all the medical services, 911 and everything else. You know, what is our collective attitude about those things? We can't believe it. It can't happen to us. Well, could be a problem. This is how it is with us. You know, we throw things in the can, we take it to the street, we flip the lever, and it all disappears down the drain. Well, failed sanitation is the hidden deadly disaster that can cause more misery than anything else. Now, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem because there's so many details in this that to talk about them would actually take a lot of time. And I'm kind of limited in what we can do. I've got more than 10 hours of class that's already published on this. It won't all fit in the short time that we have. So what I can do is give you kind of the big picture and some strategy. Get you thinking is what I want you to do, because I've got less than 60 minutes to jam in all of this information where I've got it published and you can easily get at it. Then you can go study it. What I want you to do is get serious, truly serious about looking into this and digging in deeper than probably what you've already been told about these things. So strategies for sanitation and water, that's what you need to have. So we're going to talk about strategies and big picture some more. Well, first line of defense is you need to strengthen your immune system now. Get as healthy as you can, lifestyle and all those things. Then you must be able to maintain your own health and wellness. whether it's medications or herbs or all these things you have to do, you've got to get that into place and know that you can take care of it, because if you can't get to the pharmacy or to the health food store or to the doctor, if you just can't get there or they're not there, what are you going to do? You've got to be working in that area. And you have to be ready to care for your own sanitation, because prevention is so much easier than what am I going to do now that I am on the floor groaning and running at both ends. It's much harder to fix the problem when it's there rather than to not let these guys get a hold of you. That's the bottom line. Okay. We're going to start with the worst sanitation issue first, the worst one. And this is one that's the most deadly substances on earth, and it's one that we have control over, and that is human waste. Now, when we get right down to this, we think about sanitation stuff. Well, it's socially undiscussable. We don't like to talk about. I ask people when I'm doing a live audience there, or even here, we can say, let me see the show of hands of people that sit around the dinner table with all the kids and everybody and said, tonight's discussion is going to be poop. Now, we had nine children. We had 6 boys first. Yeah, that goes really well when you talk about those things. But the reality is we haven't had to do that. We don't have to talk about it, and we're afraid to discuss it. We're going to watch it on TV with, dirty jobs or something like that. But we're not going to talk about that stuff. I mean, that's unpleasant. Well, my message is simple. Get over it and deal with it. You've got to get over it and deal with it with yourself, friends, neighbors, family, some of the things like that. Because if you don't, it can get you, is the bottom line. Now, this human waste issues. We're going to start with the least hazardous, go to the most hazardous. So the least hazardous is, well, urine. Now, by the way, actually, urine is a resource. It is a very valuable resource if you understand how to use it, where, and when. Then we have garbage. This is all the organic things that are left over from the garden, scraped off your plate, or things that died around you or what have you, the mice, the rats, or what have you. And that's okay. Those are easy to deal with. The big one is the fecal matter. The stuff that comes out of the human bowel is really, really nasty stuff in terms of infection rates and what it can do to make you sick. So you must have real sewer down solutions that work, and you have to know that they work before you lose the sewer or the water or the other things that can get, services to you. So when the system is disrupted, your actions will determine your outcome. So you have to think downstream and upstream. You have to take responsibility. Right back to that thing about the law of stewardship responsibility. You must take responsibility, and you have to do it quickly. You've got to do it early on. You take immediate action. And what we're talking about, thinking upstream and downstream, it's the people that are downstream from you, either water-wise and or stream-wise or river-wise and or the sewer system, who's up, hill from you, who's down from you. You have to think community. You should be thinking community now. You're helping each other to learn and plan and what have you. But when it breaks, you need to be into action right away. And I don't mean when, things shut down, the power's off for a couple hours or things like that. It's like when everything is down, it's down, you recognize it's down. Don't think, oh, it's just going to come back. The world is dark. You need to take action now because it's going to creep up on you. So what are you prepared to do when these things are lost? How do you handle that? What's your thinking now? What's your experience been? Well, people will normally think about, the pit toilet, the outhouse. Grandma and grandpa had one on the farm. We used to have to go out there and do that, and that was unpleasant, what have you. That's what Haiti did, by the way. Haiti went to the pit trenches and everything like that. It's a real problem. The RV holding tank. Well, maybe you have a holding tank. That's kind of nice. You can go use that. Now you got 50 gallons of really yucky stuff. And if there is no dump station and or you can't get there, what the heck are you going to do with that stuff? What you don't want to do is think like, well, nobody's looking. I'll just go down this road over here and dump it in the gutter or alongside the road. That's what Haiti did. Then we have the chemical toilets and the porta potties. Okay, that's nice kind of a system that you can use, but it's dependent on a system where you can dispose of it properly. Now that you put it in the blue water and you pickle it, what the heck are you going to do once you pickle it? You've got to have a disposal method. And of course, we have the bushes. By the way, I've used a lot of bushes because I've traveled remotely a lot, and I've used a lot of bushes. You have to do it properly, know when you should not use the bushes out there. I've done it in all kinds of conditions and what have you, and it's okay if you're prepared to deal with it. But some of the bushes are deadly. Superdome after Katrina, deadly place to be. Pictures that came out of there are just horrific, is what it comes down to. And these kinds of things after the disaster comes where people may be relieving themselves and or their sewage or what have you being around that water. Yeah, that might also be the only source of water you have. That's why we have to talk about water. It's a real serious problem. Okay, so what are you prepared to do? Well, it kind of depends on what you're now doing and how you're doing it. You see, what system are you now using? Most people, probably almost everybody on this call, is on a municipal system. Some people are not. You may, in fact, have a septic system. The municipal system, when the power goes off, when the water goes off, it went away, and it may not be coming back for days, weeks, months, years. If you're on the personal septic system, that might still work if you've taken care of it and maintained it. So we're going to talk about these things a little bit, and then what are your options that you want to have in place now, short-term and long-term. All right, so we have three systems to talk about: personal septic, composting toilets, and the manual system. And you need to know what your options are, how you'd use them. Now, the personal septic system, rural, off municipal sewer, buried septic tank, that can work pretty well, but it requires a source of water for flushing. And if you've lost your water source, then you're out of your septic system. Now, one of the things you have to understand is that septic systems, they're kind of self-contained, non-electric, low maintenance. I didn't say no maintenance. If you got one, pump that regularly, put some of the enzymes and things down there, and don't put things down that you shouldn't be put down there. It's not tied into an infrastructure. There are groundwater concerns. That's why when we get into populated areas, we eliminate the septic tanks and we go to a municipal system because you're pumping too much nasty stuff into the ground, and that'll contaminate your water wells and your springs. The other thing you need to understand is you can use your gray water, non-drinkable water. You can repurpose that to be flushing your toilet. In other words, sinks and showers and bathtubs and things like that. You can flush your toilet with that. Would be fine if you have a system that still works. Now, if you're on a municipal system, don't be flushing your toilet. That's what you got to cut out right away. Okay, number two, for the city dwellers, and if the septic or the sewer goes away, you can't use it because you don't have water, and or the pipes are broken, and or the sewer treatment doesn't work. Well, you've got the composting toilets you can look at. There's a lot of them that you can look up and you can understand how and why they work. You have to understand what they will do, what they will not do. They're not the universal solution for large quantities of people unless you have the proper ones and know how to use it. Composting toilets, wonderful thing to think about, but you do need to understand this is a biological system. When you look at that forest where this one's located outside, that's not a holding tank underneath that. That's one of these composting toilets. It's in a place where it doesn't freeze because you need the biologics to still be working in there so that it will digest and break this stuff down. But here's the thing that you can learn to do now for, I'll say, many people that may be on a sewer system, and this is a must-have book. Don't fool around, just get the book. The Human Ore Handbook, get the 4th edition of that. Now you can download the 3rd edition, which has 50 less pages in it. It's available free as a PDF. I recommend you buy the book because, for one thing, you want to have a hard copy. And think about printing out 300 pages on your printer. Unless you have one that uses really low cost printing, it's going to cost you more than that book to print it out. You want a hard copy because when the internet, the power and things are gone away, you might still need to be doing references for yourself, and or if you're already using that system, which I'm experimenting with and learning to use it, but you may need to teach your neighbors. So you want to give them the book and say, read this book, go do this. So if you get sick around me, you give me a problem. There is another one. This is the the Compost Toilet Handbook by Joseph Jenkins. Also, nicer illustrations, prettier book. It doesn't have quite as much information on the details as the Human Ore Handbook does. This is the classic. You should have that book. You should be studying and practicing some of those things now. Now we come to another one that's a temporary solution if you haven't got these other things in place. And it's what I call the Deuteronomy 23:13 system. It's a manual system. And why do I call it Deuteronomy 20:23? Well, it's real simple here. What it is, and I'll describe to you a little bit of how this system works and what you're going to be doing, and then you'll see why I call it that. First off, key concept number one is you keep the urine separate from the fecal matter. And by the way, as far as I'm concerned, you ought to be doing this now. And my wife doesn't like to be around my classes because I'll tell people I've been doing this for years, and it's a resource I've been using. So here's what you do. You're going to dispose of each separately. That is the urine versus the fecal matter. Urine is safe and easy to work with. It's very, very valuable resource you can use. As long as you're not mixing these two together, you have less weight and volume to handle the really nasty stuff, less contamination if you spill something. You don't have this soupy, sloppy mess when it's all mixed together. You reduce odor. So we're going to take the urine separately, deal with it very easily, very simply, and then we'll have the fecal matter that we'll capture in a different way. Unless you're using the full composting system like Joseph Jenkins teaches, you're going to keep it separate. All right. It's a resource. And there's a class I teach. As a matter of fact, I'll be publishing this one online as a part of the sanitation series that's already going up right now on about urine. And I used to threaten to do that class for a number of years. This was, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years ago when I did my first class on urine. I thought nobody's going to show up to this, going to come to this, office auditorium to listen to some crazy guy talk about urine. I could just see it, somebody's leaving their house and their neighbor says, "Hey, Bob, where are you going tonight?" "Well, I'm going to a class." "What's the class on?" "Urine." He'll probably never want to talk to you again. But it is a valuable resource. If you handle and use it properly, it's very, very useful for you to have. So I want you to consider that in the future because I'll have that up. Now, key concept number two that you want to be doing is you have to have a safe, long-term method of properly disposing of the fecal matter, the poop. You've got to handle it properly, dispose of it properly. So this is the system. First off, fecal matter is very dangerous. Recognize that it's very dangerous. We really spread disease with that. And that's where a lot of the sanitation issues overseas and people that don't have a good way of disposing or don't understand, they're getting sick all the time. You must be prepared in advance. If you get this wrong, people get sick and die. You want to practice and know you can do it, and you keep the urine from being mixed in. And here's the instruction manual, Deuteronomy 23:13. Go look it up. "And thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be when thou ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee." When the Lord had the children of Israel in the wilderness, he's got this mass of people, somewhere between 2 and 3 million people, and their bodies work just like ours do right now. And they got a lot of stuff to get rid of out there, and they can't be spreading that around camp or any place. They have to get it in the ground. You see, the master engineer who created this place created the soil to take care of these things if humans will handle it properly. The soil, and more importantly, the life in the soil, the nematodes, the worms, the bacteria, the viruses, fungi, and all those things, get it under the surface where it can be held safely, and then it can be digested, broken down, made into earth again. We heard the statement, dust to dust, you're made out of the dust. Well, you're going to be turned back into dust. Yeah, that's true. How about everything that passes through you? And oh, by the way, if you're eating out of your garden like you may have to, you're going to have to be putting some things back. But if you do it wrong, you get sick. That's where Joseph Jenkins' book comes in. Very, very important that you understand how to do that, because you deplete your soil constantly after a few years. You're not going to stay well because of what you're eating. Now, the details on how to do this with, I'll say, our modern infrastructure around us and what we would use is how to convert your wet toilet into a dry disposal system and how to get rid of this stuff. It's all in the details of this class, which is the Hidden Deadly Disaster. And that is online, going online now. I don't sell DVDs anymore simply because people kept telling me, "I don't even have a DVD player. What do I do?" Okay, it's streaming online. That's what a lot of people do. So it is available on jimsway.com. I'll tell you more about that. So here's 3 things that you can be thinking about, 3 systems. If you have the personal septic, set yourself up so you still may be able to use that. Eventually, that may break down, clog, or what have you, but you have some time. the composting toilets that you can put in, the small, I'll say standalone ones that sit on the floor. By the way, these right here, these will handle on a full-time basis without electricity, 2, maybe 3 people. Short term, you can have a few more people in there. If you have an electric fan that runs them, now you can get up to 4 people. You may need something like this or the Clavus multrum, some of these others that can then take masses of people. So understand that it won't handle a lot of people when you don't have power. Now, expedient short-term solutions, you have to consider these because when something happens, you want to be ready right now. And this is a thing that you can do today, tomorrow, by Monday. Got a bucket? Okay, this is where you can start. You can have one that will be, well, you might use this one right here for the urine. You might have another one with a bag in it for the solids, because keep them separate because of how you're going to dispose of them and how you're going to handle them. So you start that right now. So maybe a couple of these, that'd be a place. And by the way, you don't have to have the toilet seat. It just keeps the ring from being too deep on your hiney when you're using these things. So it helps. In Jenkins' book, you'll learn how to make something that's even better. Now, you decide early when something happens. When some emergency occurs, things are shut down, things are not working, it looks kind of serious. Don't sit around and wait and say, well, gee, I wonder what's going to happen. Now, if you're already using a composting toilet, and if you have a septic system that's okay to flush with, then your lifestyle didn't change in this area immediately. It might change a little later. If you're on a regular flush toilet in a municipal system, your life just changed right now. Of course, what you have to understand is what's the expected duration. You want to start early with a bag in a bucket so that well, here's the problem. It's temporary for a few days is what you want to consider. And it is something you want to have ready to do it right now. And you don't want to wait until the toilet bowl is full of really yucky stuff. There's no water to flush it, because let me be, gross. I don't mean to be, but here's the truth. You're going to be down in there with a teacup dipping that stuff out after a while because you can't stand the smell. Don't let it go that way. You need to take intervention right now. And what you're going to be able to do, well, it depends on where you live. If you live in a rural area like I do, or one of my sons does, that's one thing. If you live in city and row houses, or if you're in an apartment building, it's going to be a different set of actions we could talk about another time, but you can do something temporary real quickly with the bucket and the bag and some cat litter, peat moss, or something like that. But if you use that system, it's because you're looking and saying the system's going to come back within a day or two. If you've determined it's not going to come back within a day or two, you're going to have to evacuate, but you can use this in the meantime. Leave it behind. Don't open the window and drop it out the window. Store it in the house. Anyway, you've got to think about it. It's been crazy what I've seen people do, so I try to tell them a little bit about this. Okay, temporary solutions when you're on the move. A class that I published, it's on DVD, it's now going up in my members area on the website, is an evacuation kit to live by, which is not your typical 72-hour kit, which is full of trinkets, baubles, and beads. And the sanitation set, and it looks like this. And you can learn about that in that DVD or online, because you don't want to show up in the Superdome or the equivalent of that with just your hat in your hand and going like, okay, where do I find something that flushes? And there's nothing that flushes. What happened in the Superdome, there were people, they went into the bathrooms and they used the bathroom until the bowls were full and running over. Then it was in the trash cans, then it was in the sink, then it was in the halls and the offices. It was a disaster sanitation-wise. All right. Your overall strategy in sanitation must cover 6 additional areas that you've got to be looking at. These are all covered in more in depth than here, but one of them is if you're tied to a municipal sewer system and if you have a basement, there's a potential for flooding into your basement when things get blocked off down below you. Maybe it'll still keep running downhill, but there's things that happen, and if it gets blocked off and backs into your basement, I have pictures of that, and that's an ugly thing. You don't want to go there. You've got to understand about having cleaners and sanitizers so you can keep things sanitized and cleaned up. You want to understand personal hygiene, some of the things that you're going to do there. And one of those topics that comes up regularly is this little issue right here.
Emma. Huh? Emma. 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 Emma.
Yep. What are you going to do? You've got it in the storage. That's great. When all of your rolls look like that, and your paper towels and your napkins and all those things, you need to understand some options that you have. You can learn about that, but I teach some of that within that class, what you can do to be ready to deal with that. And you've got to do it. You must think about it and be ready. Keeping things cleaned up. And where you don't have the electric things and the automatic things that you've got, how are you going to keep them cleaned up? Have the supplies, have the tools, personal protection as a part of hygiene also. How do you keep the vermin and pests under control? This is all a part of sanitation so that we don't spread disease. So following a disaster, you must know that you have a sewer down solution that will really work, because failure is deadly, is the bottom line. Now, we're going to step over into the twin sister, water, because it's all a part of sanitation is what it comes down to. These two classes, the Liquid of Life class is online right now, where you can get into it. It's 5 hours of instruction. The 4 DVD set is going up every day that I can get more of it up. So strategies on this one. What you have to understand is this. When the infrastructure has failed, water, sewer, electricity, transportation, all those things, that will guarantee really bad water after a while. Now, loss of sanitation infrastructure won't be a hazard to you if, you can keep things sanitary and clean. If you have safe water for cleaning and some of this set aside, if you properly dispose of human waste, if you've stored sufficient safe drinking water to get yourself started, and then you can purify water so that you can drink it and or clean with it. So I call that the Liquid of Life. That's the class that's available to you right now, streaming online. Now, contaminated water is deadly serious, and it's not just about feeling bad. It's the fact that you may not be able to do the things you need to do to take care of other people, particularly elderly, other sick, and the babies and infants and what have you. If you're all out of shape, how do you take care of them? This is where we come back to these laws and truths that I want to talk about. The reason I take a principle-based approach, not just giving you a list of things to buy and this is what you do, is for this reason right here. Safe water from highly contaminated water is more complex than the industry wants you to believe. You're being sold a lot of things that, by the way, are good things, but they don't tell you what they will and will not do. Let's consider what municipalities do, particularly our bigger municipalities do, to give safe drinking water. You say, what the heck does a municipality have to do with my emergency water? Everything. They are big, complex, expensive, and how can we learn anything from them? Well, I'll tell you how it applies to us in it. You can go online and look up all these different cities in here, and they take you through all these different steps of what they do to deliver safe water. Break it down into the things that they go through. Typically, there are 6 stages, and within those 6 stages, there are additional other steps that they take to be sure that they deliver clean water to you. And you have to understand they're dealing with relative clean water to start with from rivers, streams, lakes, springs, wells, and what have you. They go to great distances and great depths to bring quality water that they still run through that system. They are not dealing with trash water. They're not dealing with highly contaminated water. They're still doing all of these steps when they're dealing with rather clean water. They also have a constantly monitoring of the water quality. They're also having maintenance that's going on continually, daily in some cases. Some cities actually have continuous monitoring of the water to know that it's safe, because when something goes wrong, they're going to get sued. And that's what happens. Remember back in Minneapolis, we had 100+ people die there because they had a filtration system that broke down They didn't know it was broken down until people were filling up the hospitals. And consider this, you don't have a way to test the water, but you may be dealing with really ugly wild water, or it might be absolute filthy trash water, and that's all you have. What are you going to do? Well, you're being sold that what you need to do is get one inexpensive plug and play filter chemical process that's going to do everything. Get real. If you get this wrong, you get sick and maybe die. So you have to take a look at this a little more seriously than what the salesperson is telling you in the sales literature. Now, I'm not saying that what they're telling you is absolutely false. It's just that will it work under real world, worst case conditions long term? How long is your emergency going to be going? And what if they're wrong? Or what if your interpretation is that you just kind of assume some things that they didn't actually spell out and say? Because they didn't say it and clearly spell it out, you assume that it will in fact work in these conditions. You don't know is the bottom line. You have to understand you've got the overkill in this area. Let me give you some principles here. First off, it's more complex than you're being told. It's more expensive than you're being told. It's understanding is vitally important. It's not hard, but it is a little more complex. Proper maintenance will be required, and you've got to understand how, when, and where to do those kinds of things. You can't cheat when things are bad. Now, using our stream water and lake water right now, it's probably no big deal. But during an emergency, this is a parachute. If the parachute doesn't open because you got it wrong, you simply die. Okay. Now, then there may be 5 to 9 stages are required. That's the truth, not your one little pump or your one little filter or 2 or 3 of them. And the stages must not be blended together. They need to be separate. This is vital because the separate and distinct stages mean you can service it, because when one of them is plugged up or failed to absorb what it's absorbing, you want to service it rather than have to throw the whole thing away. So those are some principles that you need to understand. Okay, let's take a look at a few more principles right here. And again, I just blow through these really quick, big topic. Pre-treatment is very important that you have. You may have an optional stage in there for clarification and flocculation, just like cities. Coarse pre-filters, maybe 3 to 10 micron in there. Then you'll run through a fine pre-filter, 0.5 micron to 1 micron. Then you might, if you're doing filtration in particular, then you go down to a bacteria filter, 0.2 micron. And here's where you have to understand the difference between absolute and nominal when we're talking about filters. Nominal filtration. A 2x4, that's a nominal measurement. What's a 2x4? Well, it's 1.5 by 3.5 inches, but it's called a 2x4. If it was an absolute measurement, it would be a 1.5 by 3.5 would be the measurement on that. So when something says that it has a filtration of 0.2 micron or 0.1 microns or what have you, if they don't say it's absolute, that means that it'll filter out 85% of anything that is that small or larger. 85%. That means 15% gets through. And what that means is that when you're dealing with just a few hundred or a few thousand, the fact that you let through a few, that's probably not a problem. But when you're dealing with trash water that may have millions and billions of critters in it, letting through 15% could just completely overwhelm you. So these are principles you need to understand. Okay, then we move on to organics removal and absorber, and then you may have reverse osmosis, something you can use, but it takes pump and power to do that. Post-viral treatment. Now, there are some filters, ultrafiltrations, that will in fact filter out some viruses. But here again, when you're talking about a single stage of kinds of things, you must not trust it. I don't care what the manufacturer says, you can't afford to get sick, is the bottom line. Some of these viruses are extremely small, 0.01 microns, tiny little things. And so just trying to do it with when they say that it'll do that, that's under optimum ideal conditions. You're talking about trash water that can kill you. Chemical removal, if you're using, in addition to this, you might have some chlorine or iodines or other things there. You may not want to drink that long term. So those are some of the things you consider, and ion exchangers for radioactive salts. And then distillation sometimes will really take care of things. But here's the thing that the guys selling the stills don't tell you. Takes a massive amount of energy to distill water with the way that they're made because they're extremely inefficient. I do some things on that also. So here we go. Now, trash water. We're not talking about your clear lake waters and stream waters. I'm talking about trash water because that's worst case and that's all you have. These are not disaster water solutions. And you look at that and you go like, oh my heck. Well, you have to understand these are all good products. By the way, I own almost all of them. I have them. The countertop drip filters are really good. This can be one of the stages that you may use, but you're going to have to use 5 to 9 stages, and it may in fact include chemicals in the process. This is where we go back to the law of stewardship, your authority, responsibility, accountability. It's yours. The law of the parachute. It has to be right because you'll be held accountable for it when you get sick. And you have no way to test that water, no way to know. Here's the chart that'll tell you everything. This is what's in my class, and we spend a lot of time on this, and the one that I have online streaming, and it's all put together here, and I've never saw this done. That's the reason I did this, so I can teach people about all the different methods, because some of them do what they will do very well, but there's little things they don't do. You need to understand that. So in the liquid of life, these 4 parts are going to teach you what you need to know. And by the way, one of the reasons I'm now publishing online is because I've got part 5 and part 6 to add to water. And also in the sanitation, I've got some more that I've got to add in because, well, let's dig a little deeper. These are the basics is what I'm teaching here. So anyway, both of these classes, 9 hours, are available online, and it is in my subscription area, $5.99 a month. Subscribe for a month or 2, watch the classes, then unsubscribe. I don't care. But it helps me pay for what it is that I'm doing. And there's a whole bunch of other classes in there you might want to watch too. Plus a lot of handouts that are part of those classes. They're all online, another 6 or 7 of them along with those. That'll give you some of the tools you need to understand for water and sanitation because you can't afford to get this wrong. Okay, following a disaster, you must know what you have is a foolproof solution because failure can be deadly. And when you're taking a look at what it's going to take to really filter and or purify water, these are the stages, and one that I've worked with some other people to put together so that I can take sewer water and make it safe to drink. Not that I want to, and I'm certainly not going to be looking for sewer water, but if it's that bad, I need to know that I can do it. So in conclusion, a lot of things online that you can get on my website, and you need to understand that there's just no doubt that sanitation, which includes the water, is a parachute, and you cannot cheat, is what it comes down to. You've got to get it right. Then sanitation preparedness, you must do. It covers these 2 areas, keeping things clean and having safe water, keeping your environment clean and having safe water. So loss of sanitation infrastructure is not going to be a problem for you if you can keep things sanitary, have safe water for cleaning, properly dispose of human waste, have stored safe drinking water to get you started, to keep you going long enough until you have solved the problem and you can then purify whatever water you have around you. So these 2 areas here, all sanitation, water and sanitation is about that. There's a lot of classes, things that I teach and other people teach. You look at this curriculum and say, oh my gosh, in all these areas, this is my class curriculum, and here do I have to know, do, and have everything? Get real. You can't possibly have, know, and do everything. What that means, and something that you need to be looking at, is you never, ever try to do this alone. In other words, you need a community. What's a community? It's a unified body of individuals bound together through agreed upon attitudes, character, interests, needs, and fellowship, participation, work ethic, and commitments to the positive benefit of all. Creating communities is one of the things I've talked about for years. So we do classes on that. We're all in this together. It's online also. You can watch that and then learn how to build communities because you need to be doing that. And a lot of the people here, I recognize some of the people here, and I know you're doing that as a part of the community that you're in this group on TACTA. That's great, but it has to be within walking distance of you. So in order to survive, this is the thing about community you have to understand. Others around you must be engaged. You see, if you're doing everything right, but no one else is, your ability to stay well is drastically diminished. As a matter of fact, it may be totally negated. So community is important. You've got to get talking to people, working with people. And if you have a bunch of people you cannot work with and talk to, you better move or have a place to go to when it gets bad. So life happens. Be ready. Make it an adventure because you're ready to deal with it. And true preparedness is not based is based on principles and not on a list of things that you buy and skills. By the way, you buy them, you practice them, you have skills. But what you know is more important than what you have, because you might lose everything sometime because you had to bail fast. Your knowledge is what you can take with you. Hopefully you don't have to do that. So when we look at this thing, preparedness, I believe it's a lifestyle. I prefer to call it provident living, testing and trying and having fun and playing with and doing things all for the positive reasons. It's not about gloom and doom. It's about being prepared to deal with the future in a very positive way. Because if you make proper provisions in all areas of your life that we've been talking about, then you can face the future with hope and confidence. So that's my mission, which is to reach and teach as many people as I can. That's why I do things online and these other classes. I love to do them and share. I would encourage you to go to my website if you haven't been there. It's just jimsway.com. You can register for the newsletter, which is the Provident Living Times. I do weekly class. Well, I do 2 classes a week. Wednesday night, I do a class, Wednesday evening. The link is in the Provident Living Times. And on Saturday, I do a Q&A session every morning. That's why my voice is a little ragged, because we did that this morning. Also, I have a YouTube channel that I've just loaded some more things into, and I'll be loading up more regularly. There's a link on my website to the Provident Living, to the Facebook that I have, and also to the YouTube. I'm not doing as much on Facebook because I'm just too darn busy right now. But you can get things there, lots and lots of free stuff, lots of links and things. You can get educated. Of course, there's other people that teach great things too. You need to get the stuff inside your head. As I mentioned, I don't publish any of these classes on DVD anymore. They're all online. These 2 classes are available to you. The water class is available right now. You can just go in, subscribe, sign in, start going through that. There's a bunch of other classes there that you can watch, and I'm getting the Hidden Deadly Disaster up. They'll all be in the members only area. And in the open library, the public library, there's a whole bunch of classes there also that are that I've done. There's some things you can download. The 72-hour kit could kill you. And I mentioned that one because that's what I actually taught at TACTA in April of 1997. We just recorded that. We were going through a 72-hour kit, and they're useful, but you really need to have something more than the typical 72-hour kit. So I'd encourage you to do that. I'll be glad to help you as I can. I'll stay around tonight. Got it in under the hour, barely. And I'll answer questions as long as people want to talk about things. I can go back and show pictures and those things. But I'll also encourage you, if you're interested, you can come to Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. It's open forum for anybody that wants to come. We're usually talking about classes I just did, but you can bring up any topic. And if I have answers, I'll try to give them to you or steer you where to go. And this is my whole job and profession right now. So thank you. I'm done with what I have to present, and we'll take any questions or comments right now.
I'd like to thank Jim for what he's done, but we can leave the, stay on and let him answer questions for as long as you need to.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I did put you know how they tell you to put the I forgot what it's called, the barrels of water, as water storage. I did that, and I have one of them in the garage just in case, earthquake or whatever, a disaster. And I did treat it with, those drops you buy, the water drops. So if you do that, then can it stay there indefinitely? I mean, is it good to drink? Because I did treat it. I went through the whole process.
Well, yeah, you're probably, as long as the barrel was clean, new, didn't have anything in it, and it's tight and it can't get contaminated, that water will be good. Now, most of the time we're going to be storing in the plastic barrels. One of the things that will happen is, and by the way, don't store distilled water or reverse osmosis water. You don't want to do that, because that water is going to more likely want to pick up plasticizers from the barrel. But even if they do that, it's extremely important that you store the water, because if you do get a little bit of the chemical in there, you're going to die in 3 days without water. It may take you 10 years to get cancer from the plasticizer. So you have to kind of weigh your options and what is practical to do. So yes, that water is going to be safe. What you can do, and what I would prefer to do if I've had it stored, is I may in fact run it through a carbon-based filter, taking it out. That'll remove any other taster in there. And if there's any of the chemicals left in there, it can remove those so that you're not consuming them, whether it be chlorine or iodine. But yes, it's very important that you have something to drink. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble.
And so there's I think a filter you can buy that has a little pump that you can use for those I think 50 gallon barrels, or I can't remember what it is, but is that the kind of filter you're talking about then?
Yes.
Plastic that has a little pump, and it's a filter and a pump, and you put it on top of the barrel, and then you can filter the water and pump it out as well.
Yes, you can do that. And that's what I recommend that you do. But again, if you don't have one of those, you don't have any water, you've got a 99.9% chance that water will be perfectly safe, but it's that 1% that could get you into trouble. So that's why I'll just say overkill, because when there's no clinic that I can go to, then I just cannot afford to get sick.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so the water then can be good for years then? I mean, as long as there's no expiration date on this water?
Well, water doesn't rust or decay or what have you. Water can become contaminated. Water can absorb things from the plastic materials. There's some of them that are, if you store it in stainless steel, that would be better, but you probably can't afford that unless you're a farmer with an old milk tank. Then you can do that. Water can just become contaminated. It doesn't break down just in storage. So it will be okay, is the bottom line. But here again, if it's going to be absorbing any of the plasticizers out of the barrel, that's why I prefer to run it through a carbon-based filter, because I know I put it in clean, because I filter it before I put it in. And then I'm going to take it out when I've have put it in the barrel. If I can smell any odor or anything in it at all, the plastic kind of smell, then I want to run it through a filter.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank
you. Bet.
Hey, Jim, it's nice to meet you finally. I've been putting water that I have from my reverse osmosis system at the house, but it has an alkaline replacement, and putting those into soda bottles. Does that alkaline replacement reduce the likelihood it's going to absorb PCBs or anything else that's coming out of the plastics?
Yes, that will help. I prefer to just store hard water, because it really doesn't, it's already absorbed everything it absorbed. But if you're using reverse osmosis, and if you're putting the minerals back in it, then it's going to be much better. But here again, I say I don't want to store reverse osmosis or distilled water, because that's hungry water. It wants to absorb things. Distilled water is the universal solvent. It likes to pick up things. But if you're putting the minerals back into it, that's going to be much better. But again, even let's say it didn't, and you picked up some PCBs or plasticizers from that, you don't drink the water, and you're going to die in 3 days from dehydration. So you have to be practical.
Yeah, and that's certainly, it was just a less expensive option for me. I don't really keep 55-gallon barrels here at the house. I do have them at the retreat location, but soda bottles, we could use them. They're free, and but I went ahead and, like I said, I invested for a whole house reverse osmosis. But the kitchen has the spout to replace the alkalines. God bless you. To replace the alkalines back into it. But yes, I worked in dialysis for over a decade, almost 12 years. And it opened my eyes and made me a water snob, because I learned about what all gets into the water just through the pipes alone. So yeah, it's certainly important to, like you said, if you don't have anything else, drink it. But if you can, filter it at all costs.
Right. Yep, you're correct. Good to see you, Peter.
Nice to meet you.
I usually, when I'm doing presentations, I turn the camera off, because who wants to look at an old man anyway? I find it distracting, but that's me in my lair right here in my office, library, and what have you. So glad to meet all you folks. Well, any other questions or comments or what have you? You're either put to sleep, scared, can't figure out what to ask, or hopefully you're just grasping it and let these things kind of ruminate for a little while. Because the way I've approached all of this through the years, I began in the cold weather winter area because I recognize that people are very poorly prepared to deal with winter, particularly extreme cold when they have no utilities. So I started in that area and was teaching that for years, but then I was listening to what other people are saying about some of these other topics and water and sanitation and different tools and fire building and all this stuff. And I keep asking the question is, well, is that the bottom line? Is that the truth really? What's the truth really? What if? Lots of what if questions. And it caused me to dig a little deeper because of my science background. I start to ask the questions and find that we haven't got to the bottom line on this. And particularly when you're talking about products, and I've had a lot of things through the years I've either bought or I've been sent to test, and I try to test them to the limit and find out what they will do. My job is to try and break them, but it is, if it fails right away, then I'll tell people don't buy that. It's a piece of junk is what it comes down to. And that's where most of the commercially available 72-hour kits are just don't bother. Trinkets, baubles, and beads, and they will fail very quickly. And the usefulness of some of those, well, the typical 72-hour kit, we call that a refugee kit that'll let you go to the auditorium with 5,000 other really unhappy people and stand in line with them. Yes, you'll be better off than the people who came with nothing, but I don't want to be around all those people because they're unhappy, and unhappy people do unhappy things. Let's see, somebody's hand is up there.